The Radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show. Monday, July 14th, second show today. Focused on the news. Now. Thanks to those of you who joined us for the interview earlier this afternoon. You can catch it, of course, it's all recorded. It's all up on YouTube. You can catch it whenever you want. I think it was a good interview. Interesting stuff. And consistent with kind of a theme, I'm trying to expose you guys to economists out there, free market economists who have the right view of Donald Trump's policies and also of the state of the world and where we are as in America today and the lies of the populist movement. Next week we've got George Selgin. George Selgin is an economist, an expert in banking, expert in monetary policy. And George has just published a book about the Great Depression. And we'll be talking to him about the Great Depression. Did FDR save us? Was FDR a hero? What of the things that FDR did were good? What were bad? And what caused the Great Depression? How did we get into that mess? I think you'll find it interesting. And it won't just be FDR, everything he did was bad. I mean, some things he did were good, given the situation the country found itself.
Ja, du kannst natürlich nicht jemanden, wenn du hier in Deutschland bist, dann auch steinigen wegen Emo.
That was interesting. Sorry about that. I accidentally pressed play on a video of some Islamist speaking Swedish. Have to be careful what I press on. All right, let's get started. It's a little late today. We'll see how long we go. I mean, how long we go depends on you. I've got some news stories. None of them are particularly long. Jason said that was Polish, not Swedish. Okay, maybe it was Polish. I don't know. Anyway, we've got a few news stories. But, of course, how long we go is going to depend on you, how many questions you have. The more questions, the more comments, the longer we will go. I do have very few questions left over from the interview. There were more to me than to him, and that's why I left it for now. But feel free to jump in with questions about the news or about anything else that you want to ask me. Just make sure to put a dollar amount in front of the question. There we go. And Robert, thank you for the sticker. Robert's already got us off of the sticker on the stickers. All right, big news today, this morning, was that Bitcoin hit went over $120,000 a coin. $120,000. It's pretty astounding. And I know a lot of you out there have Bitcoin. So now that you're gazillionaires, you really should support the Yaron Brook Show. Just saying. Anyway, 120,000. That is pretty amazing. And of course, the question is, what's going on? I mean, a lot. Again, any particular day's movement in Bitcoin is driven by speculation and by a bunch of different things. But Bitcoin has risen more than 10%. In the past 7 days. It has, in spite of all the ups and downs and challenges and tariffs and everything else going on in the United States, it has held kind of around 100,000, really since December when it first hit 100,000. And there's a lot of wealth now, tied up with Bitcoin. So it's worth talking a little bit about that. I think there are a number of things going on about Bitcoin. People view Bitcoin as a inflation hedge. I don't know that there's any validity really for that. Bitcoin is not used as a medium of exchange, but people do view it as a store of value. And therefore, with the constant haranguing that Donald Trump does of Jerome Powell and the threatening to fire Jerome Powell. And I mean, basically Donald Trump has said that the Fed should lower interest rates by 3% tomorrow, like all in one go. The Fed has never lowered interest rates by that much in its history. I think the largest one move that it did was 1 percentage point. And Trump wants them to reduce it by 3 percentage points. I think there's reason to believe that at least in the Bitcoin market, this is viewed as inflationary. And that, I think, is part of what is driving this up. But I think it's more than that. You know, there's a bunch of bills going through Congress now that are going to make Bitcoin and crypto and stable coins kind of legit. They're going to create both property rights, clarify the kind of the property rights around them, but they're also going to regulate them. And while I wish they didn't regulate anything, in this case, the industry views regulation as giving them a stamp of approval. That is, if the federal government thinks that crypto should be regulated, then crypto must be a real thing. And the government is giving it its impromptu, and the government is basically saying this is a legitimate asset category. And now we're going to try to regulate it so that it is safe. How did that work out for them with banks and a lot of other mortgages and a lot of other things that they've regulated and have not been safe at all? But I think people perceive it that way. So we now have a legal framework around stable coins with the Genius Act, and we'll see what happens. I don't think the Genius Act has been signed into law yet. But I think that stable coins are an exciting technology. And that the Genius Act, you know, is going to make them more popular. It's also going to make it more difficult for people like Amazon, companies like Amazon, to create stable coins. But it is going to make them more popular. It's going to increase people's confidence in investing in them, in getting stable coins and using stable coins and transacting in them. And I think that'll grow the market, and people believe that this will protect them from fraud, and they believe that it increased stability, and to some extent, it does. To some extent, it does. And the regulation of these stablecoins, I think, in the United States, are much better than the regulations in Europe. But so I think generally the crypto space is gaining a certain level of legitimacy, right? You need the government to come in and regulate stuff to give it legitimacy. But that's the reality in which we live. And as a consequence, more people are investing, more people are going to be engaged, more people are going to participate. There's also a number of other bills that involve bitcoins and tokens and cryptocurrencies and that are in different process in legislation. The Trump administration generally has been favorable towards crypto. Now, I think that's going to be limited. We'll see how it plays out in the future. But I think for now, they are favorable because they've got a lot of people in the tech industry who are supporting the Trump campaign, supported the Trump campaign within the administration. I think Andreessen is like crypto czar, and Andreessen is obviously very favorable towards crypto. After all, he's got a lot of investments in the space. So generally, people think this is going to be incredibly positive, and that now, if you think about the value of Bitcoin, basically the value of Bitcoin is comprised of the two components of the value of Bitcoin. One is its use for basically illegal transactions. So getting money out of countries that have capital controls, and then, I don't know, buying drugs and weapons and things like that. Those are the primary uses, I think, of crypto as money right now. Now, stablecoins is a different thing. Stablecoins is convenience. But crypto as money, that's the only real use. And then the second, so you have to value how much is it worth to have that ability. And then second, which is related, is what is the probability that one day, sometime in the distant future, the Bitcoin becomes the medium of exchange, is actually becomes the way in which to transact. And I mean, I think the probability is small, so I don't get excited about the valuation of Bitcoin. But if you think that the probability is high that Bitcoin one day will be money, then it's worth a lot more than 100,000. Right? So I think that people believe, maybe because they think inflation is coming, maybe because they see the debt situation, maybe because they think the dollar is going to collapse internationally and people are going to look for an alternative to the dollar. I think basically what the price of Bitcoin has gone up suggests is that the market is assessing the probability that Bitcoin becomes, more popular. It becomes money. That the probability of that is increased. That I think is what it is. But there's something else going on here, and this something should worry you, and scare you a little bit, because I think a lot of this is people using leverage, people borrowing money in order to buy Bitcoin and using all kinds of sophisticated financial structures and mechanisms in order to buy Bitcoin. So you have people taking out huge amounts of debt and using that debt to buy Bitcoin, and that'll work out fantastic if Bitcoin only goes up. But if Bitcoin takes a hit at some point, they have to unravel the debt and they have to sell in a panic, and things could get very, very, very ugly for a lot of people. And then, and this has happened before. This is by the way, not new. But then the firms that are raising equity and convertible debt to buy crypto, injecting the assets into vehicles that already trade on the stock exchange, kind of doing like a little bit like SPACs that we're doing with SPACs, creating these publicly traded entities that basically do nothing but own crypto. Now, that doesn't make any sense. Right? So retail investors, any one of you could buy stock in a company that basically is sitting on a leveraged position in Bitcoin. Why wouldn't you just buy Bitcoin? And if you want to leverage, take out a loan. It's very strange. And these kind of sophisticated financial structures and these strange ways of accessing the Bitcoin market make me suspicious. This is kind of behavior of a pre-meltdown, a pre-crisis. I'm not predicting that. I have no idea how to gauge the Bitcoin or crypto market. But it does usually, before you get some big move down, is you get a lot of financial engineering. Now, Strategy, for example, there's a company called Strategy. It's a software maker that has basically transformed itself. In other words, stopped writing software. And basically what it is a place that holds $70 billion worth of Bitcoin. That's it. They hold $70 billion worth of Bitcoin. And the market is giving them a premium of 200% over that. So they're being valued at over $100 billion. So, I'm sure they're using a lot of leverage to get that $70 billion. it just doesn't make sense, and it's a little scary, because once you start goosing up returns and investment using lots of leverage, it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much for everybody to have to sell and for markets to collapse. So all I'm saying is, be careful, beware of Bitcoin, of buying at these prices. Beware of stocks that are selling above their net asset value, above their holdings of Bitcoin. Beware of scams. Beware of high leverage. These are the kind of periods where people lose their mind and they think it's a gold rush. I wouldn't be surprised if Bitcoin goes to 200,000, 300,000. And I wouldn't be shocked if it was $1 million at the end of the year. But I also wouldn't be surprised or shocked if it was at 10,000 at the end of the year. It's just, hard to tell. Now, here's another example, right? So cryptocurrency companies are now racing to try to become traditional banks. They like the fact that they've got a friendly regulatory environment right now in Washington. The Trump administration is very friendly towards crypto. So you've got companies like Ripple, Silco, which is a stablecoin company, BitGo, which is a custodian of crypto. They've all applied for national trust bank charters that's going to allow them to offer bank services. And crypto exchange Kraken plans to launch bank cards in the next month. Now, I think this is all great. The banking industry needs to be reconceived, rethought, challenged, competed. So I think all of that is great. But it also is creating some real risk, volatility, and banking is tricky. Banking is, in the United States, has been, particularly small banks, been disasters. The attempts of tech companies to be banks, e-bank and internet banks and things like that, have not gone well for the most part. So it's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be fun to watch. Again, I welcome it. I think this is great, and certainly this is a massive improvement over the previous administration, which was guided by Elizabeth Warren, which basically was anti-crypto everything and basically caused the destruction and the shutting down of banks that dared to dabble in Bitcoin. This administration is the exact opposite, encouraging banks to do it, and now it looks like encouraging crypto companies to enter the banking space. That'll be interesting. Will I be surprised if Bitcoin replaces the dollar? I will be shocked. Surprise is an understatement. I don't think it'll happen. I'm willing to put real money behind the fact that it won't happen. Now, it could. That I'm not saying it's a certainty, but I think the likelihood Bitcoin replaces the dollar, certainly in my lifetime, is in my view very close to zero, and it's one of the reasons I don't hold Bitcoin. So I just don't see kind of the market mechanism that would make that possible. That would make it possible for Bitcoin to replace the dollar. Put it another way, there's no way in hell that governments, as long as they have the power to do so, will allow Bitcoin to become money, become the common medium of exchange, replacing the dollar that is controlled by the Fed. I'm not saying it wouldn't be better than a dollar. I mean, that's a completely different question. But I don't see governments allowing it. I don't see governments ceding that territory to crypto. notice that the stable coins, are not a move away from the dollar. They're actually a move to entrench the dollar. The stable coins are the regulations are going to require the issuer of the stable coin to buy U.S. Treasury bills denominated in dollars. In other words, it's a way to create a new market for Treasury bills, to link dollars to Treasury bills, and to link your tokens to Treasury bills. It's a way to turn Treasury bills into money, but it's basically dollars. And all stable coins are a representation, a digital representation of a dollar. So they're not replacing the dollar, they're enhancing the dollar system. They're making it more efficient, more effective. There's also the potential, I guess, of more inflation. Put that aside, because it depends how the government manages the treasuries that are bought in order to back up the tokens. But a transaction will be faster, will be cheaper, will be easier to do. There'll be massive benefits to having, potentially, to having stable coins. Why the government will give that up and say, no, we're giving up control of our currency, we're giving up in order to allow Bitcoin to dominate. It's just not going to happen. It has less of a possibility of happening than switching to a gold standard. And that, I think, is the probability is pretty much zero within my lifetime. So don't see it happening. Look, those of you who bought Bitcoin and have made a lot of money off of it, good for you. There's a lot of, good for you. But does it make any sense? Was it a rational decision? Is it going to become money? All of those are completely different questions that have nothing to do with the fact that Bitcoin's at 120 and you bought them at whatever, and you've made a lot of money. Just because you've made a lot of money does not make it the right decision. I know that's weird, but it doesn't. If you'd bought GameStop and then sold at the right time, you would have made a fortune. When the meme stock thing, is this a meme thing that is just lasting a couple of decades instead of just a couple of years? I don't know. It's a good question. But enjoy your winnings. Enjoy the fact that you made a lot of money. That's great. I do not resent that. But allow me to continue to be skeptical about Bitcoin becoming money. Again, I think crypto has a lot of interesting features and has a lot of interesting things that crypto generally will contribute to the economy and contribute to our lives. But I do not believe Bitcoin will ever be money. All right. Related to this, it's becoming harder and harder for governments around the world to sell bonds to the public. There is a real slump. Japan is trying to sell long-term bonds, and they're having to constantly raise the yield, the promised interest rate, in order to get people to buy them. There's very thin liquidity, increased worries about higher and higher government spending in Japan, bigger and bigger deficits. And the yields on bonds from 10 to 40 years, they have 40-year bonds, are going up and up and up. People won't buy them unless they get rewarded for the risk that they're taking. And this was not the case a year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. Now, there's an election soon, I think later this month, next week actually. But generally, markets are concerned about government spending. They're concerned about government spending in the United States because government spending means more debt. More debt means more uncertainty about being able to repay that debt. And more likelihood that the response to that will be inflationary. So that's happening in Japan, but it's also happening in Germany. Germany's 30-year bond yields, are the highest they've been in 2 years. Again, because of government spending, government promising to spend huge amounts of money on defense, right, and on infrastructure. And there's only so much they can tax. Germany's in a recession already. How's it going to pay this debt back? And Germany cannot inflate. Well, I mean, the European Central Bank could inflate, but Germany doesn't have full control over the European Central Bank, and it doesn't have a central bank of its own. So, the rates in Germany are approaching the highest they've been since 2011 when we had the Greek financial crisis. So rates are still reasonable. It's about 3.25. But in the United States, they're higher. But Germany's not used to rates like this. In the U.S., we've had over the last few months a 10-year and a 30-year bond that have yielded very high rates. People don't want to buy our debt, don't want to buy Germany's debt, don't want to buy Japan's debt. There is a real worry out there among investors about the ability of governments to repay. And I don't know how this all ends. I don't know how it plays out. Does it play out in some kind of financial crisis? But it explains a little bit why, Bitcoin, the alternative, supposedly, is going up. It explains why gold is so high and has been high this year as much as it has. It isn't matching Bitcoin right now, but it's still at near historic highs for gold and way up from where it was, just a year ago. So, people are looking, people are escaping to what they consider safe assets. By the way, if a crisis is going to happen, if a real crisis is going to happen, real crisis, Great Depression-like crisis is going to happen, what would you rather have? Bitcoin or gold? To me, the answer to that is obvious. And that is, I'd much rather have gold. Bitcoin is very much dependent on, on computing power, on civilization, on electricity, on acceptance across the board, even though it has no use and has no, nobody wants it other than as a medium of exchange. Gold, people will always want gold. Always own gold. Alex says he owns bond funds. I'm not sure why you own bond funds. It depends what kind of bond funds, but if interest rates go up because of inflation, the value of the bonds goes down. So if you own bond funds, you should own inflation index bond funds, or you should own very short-term bond funds, that is treasury bills, which when the Fed lowers interest rates will go up in value. But yeah, gold, people will always want gold. They've always wanted gold in all of human history, and they always will want gold. Because Bitcoin has not proved itself as something that people actually want. People speculate about it, but the people actually want, when the rubber hits the road and you have to go out and buy groceries, what are people more likely to accept? A Bitcoin on the computer or a gold coin? I don't think it's even close. It's not even close. So if you really believe the world is we're heading towards a massive financial crisis, you would not own stocks and you would not own Bitcoin. You would own gold. Now, I don't think we're heading there, although I see a lot of warning signs that a financial crisis or some kind of crisis might be around the corner. But if you believe that, Bitcoin is the last thing you would want to own. All right. Let's see. Talk about crises. All right. Quickly on tariffs, just because it's a daily update on tariffs, I have to update you on a daily basis because they change all the time. Trump is now threatening to impose 30% tariffs on EU goods and on Mexican goods. So both EU and Mexico, 30% tariffs. But Mexico, remember, we have a free trade agreement with Mexico. We have a deal with Mexico. It's called NAFTA. That's out the window. It's gone. It's even NAFTA 2, the deal that Trump negotiated, which was an improvement over NAFTA 1. And he's basically dumping that and embracing a 30% tariff instead. The European Union is basically saying, yeah, if you put 30% tariffs on European goods, then you're practically stopping trade between the EU and the United States. They also said they don't get it because, they've been negotiating. They thought they were very close to an agreement. For negotiation for an agreement in principle. They've got an outline of a deal, and this came out of nowhere. They weren't anticipating this. They thought they had a deal, or they thought they were very close to a deal. So Trump irrationality, complete nuttiness continues. Now we'll see. They've got, until August, whatever, to finalize this, but at least for now, the threat is 30% tariffs. And Europe will retaliate, and that'll probably mostly halt the trade between the U.S. and Europe, which is about $4.4 billion a day. The 35% tariff on Canada is going to be incredibly destructive to that trade. And then 30% on Mexico, has lots of ramifications, Canada and Mexico being the two largest trade partners of the United States. And again, you will start seeing prices go up. Prices are already going up, and you will start seeing prices go up on a regular basis, systematic basis. Things will start getting more expensive in the United States. And some things potentially will indeed disappear. If Europe retaliates and then Trump puts 100% tariff on French wines, then French wines will disappear. There's an inventory of them in restaurants and places, but at some point they'll disappear. Tariffs is the epitome of a lose-lose strategy. There's no winners. And yet Trump keeps going at it because Trump is completely irrational and has, as I've often said, a 5-year-old's understanding of economics, particularly when it comes to this. Now, I know some of you think he'll backtrack from all of this. It doesn't look like he's going to. We'll see. We'll see. But it really does look like the one thing Trump is serious about in life, the one thing he believes in, is tariffs. He loves tariffs. He hates trade. And he's going to do real damage. In spite of the fact that trade is a small percentage of U.S. GDP, this kind of destructive action on even a small part of GDP is a disaster. Right? Disaster. He surrounded himself with advisors that are yes men. He hasn't surrounded himself. The first term, his advisors stopped him from doing this because in his first term, his advisors were independent thinkers who took stands. But his advisors this term, and I told you before he was elected, this is exactly the kind of people he would pick. I told you exactly what would happen before he was elected. that the people surrounding him are yes men. None of them are willing to say anything to him negative. I mean, Bessert, who is the best of them, tries here and there, but he can't get through because everybody else that surrounds Trump is cheering him along because he has placed around him a bunch of economic ignoramuses who care more about sowing Trump than about truth in economics. You should particularly be disappointed in his chief economic advisor, Hesed, something like that, who knows better. But the rest of them are they're just not going to stand up to Trump. They're just not going to disagree with him. That's the people he's chosen. That's the people he's surrounded with him. And I told you that would happen. Oh yeah, 17% additional tariffs on Mexican tomatoes. Yep, 17% additional on Mexican tomatoes. Now, if you want to understand why, I think it's pretty simple. I mean, do a Google search. I haven't done this, but I should have done this for you, but you could do it as well. Just do a Google search on who are the largest manufacturers of tomatoes in the United States. And it's probably, a couple of companies, a couple of individuals or whatever, who have some insight or have some leverage into the Trump administration and have gone over to kill competition. They don't want competition from Mexico. I actually think I know the largest manufacturer of tomatoes in America. And I don't think it would be him. He's a real kind of libertarian. He's probably he's an anarchist. So I don't think it would be him. But there must be somebody, some company, some well-positioned somebody who does not want competition from Mexican tomatoes. They're subsidized and they have cheap labor and they don't follow the environmental regulation. They come up with a million rationalizations for it. And this is it. So tomatoes, expensive. All right, let's see. Department of Education, Supreme Court today ruled, didn't write an opinion, but ruled 6-3 basically, to allow the Trump administration, for now, everything is for now because none of these are rulings on the substance, they're rulings to block other courts blocking things or to eliminate the blockage. Supreme Court has ruled for now that they're going to allow Trump to fire a significant proportion of the people working in the Department of Education, even though he has not gotten congressional approval to close the Department of Education. I think the rationale there is all he's doing is restructuring the program, although he says he's shutting it down. But I think the court's attitude is we don't want to tell the executive how to run the executive branch. And as long as he's not shutting it down without the approval of the legislature, as long as it's still functioning, we don't want to tell him how many people he needs in order to function. And people could sue over the fact that it's not functioning well, it's not functioning based on the law, but that is a different issue. So Supreme Court allowed the significant shrinkage of the Department of Education. I know a lot of you are really, really, really happy with the Department of Education kind of going away, and this is a step in that direction. Now, again, they haven't ruled on the principle of can he do this without congressional approval. They basically ruled that he can continue to do this until a court makes a ruling. That is, they've overturned the temporary block. That's all. All right, let's see. Ukraine. So Trump has reversed course on Ukraine. He is now, basically agreed to send weapons to Ukraine. And He is going to sub Patriot missiles, air defense systems to Ukraine, and offensive weapons. So this is the first time Trump has agreed to send Ukraine offensive weapons. He also seems like they will have fewer limitations on how they use the weapons than they did when Biden sold them these weapons. Now, the way he's going to do this is he's not going to use any American taxpayer money, supposedly, but these weapons are going to be bought by the Europeans or by NATO, and then donated or gifted to Ukraine. So he can tell his MAGA supporters, no, we're not funding the war in Ukraine. The Europeans are. We're just selling weapons. We can sell weapons. It's okay to sell weapons. So he comes across as not reneging on what he's promised. But it's a huge move for Ukraine. Ukraine is really struggling. The nightly massive attacks by the Russians on Ukrainian civilian population are pretty horrific. This will allow them some additional defense capabilities. And the fact that Russia is amassing troops on the border and is intent on a significant invasion into Ukraine sometime this summer, Ukraine getting some offensive weapons where it can take out Russians. I mean, they're even talking about giving them some cruise missiles launched from F-16s. They've got the F-16s, but they don't have any real weapons they can use with the F-16s. Well, Trump is considering giving them the weapons they can use now to make the F-16s effective against the Russian army. So I think this is a good move. It's a positive move. He's already done a lot of damage to Ukraine in the 5 months that he's been president, and halting, slowing, denying aid to them, and by kind of appeasing the Russians. So this is a good turn of events. Now, whether they'll stick with it, I don't know, but it certainly seems to be a good turn of events. In addition, he is now threatening, Trump is threatening, to basically place tariffs, very high tariffs, like 500%, on countries that trade with Russia. So if China buys oil from Russia, Trump is threatening to impose massive tariffs on China, basically stop trade with China, so embargo China for trading with Russia. This would devastate China. It would not be good for the United States, but it would basically destroy, Russia. Now, Russia always finds ways to get around these things. It always finds ways to sell its oil. They might move the oil to different ships, and they play all kinds of games. So I don't know how much this will help. But he is, for the first time since he became president, for the first time, he is actually threatening the Russians with real sanctions. Sanctions with a real bite. Right. All right. So Trump has become much better on Ukraine for now. We'll see how long it lasts, but for now. Let me remind you guys that if you want to ask me questions, comments that you want me to read versus other people in the chat to read, then use the super chat. Because I can't read all the chats. I sometimes glance at them and get something, but I'm not going to read all the chats, and I'm not going to answer all your questions in the chat. It's just not fair for those people who actually put dollars behind their questions. So if you want to ask me a question, the deal we have is you do that by using the super chat, put a few dollars. You guys have made so much money in Bitcoin, you can afford to ask a $20 question on a super chat. It will not diminish your net worth. All right. Asylum. Did you hear the news out of France? The Palestinians have been saved. It turns out that the Supreme Court of France has ruled, I assume this is true, that all residents of the Gaza Strip are now eligible to apply for asylum in France. I mean, that is amazing. We are now going to establish a new Palestinian state in France. They can join their other Muslim and Islamist brothers who are already established in France, and they can build a kind of a mini caliphate over there. I mean, it really is astounding. A court ruled that the Gaza Strip, everybody in the Gaza Strip, all the residents, can apply for asylum in France. I mean, go for it. Israel should help them. They should assign each Gazan family with a French-speaking consultant who can help them fill out the forms, a lawyer who can then go and argue the case in front of the French courts and get them asylum and get them shipped to France. It would be great. There you go. We've solved the Israeli-Palestinian problem. Has just been solved thanks to the generosity of the French Supreme Court. I mean, this is why I am for doing away with all asylum laws. The standard for accepting immigrants is not that they're miserable. The standard for accepting immigrants is not that they're suffering. I mean, the standard for accepting immigrants is, can they come and work in my country and pay their own way? That's it. Pay their own way. Can they find a job? Can they get a job? Can they do the basic stuff? And generally, I don't know that you should accept immigrants in the short run in mass from war zones that are between uncivilized parties. So there's zero reason to accept Palestinians as immigrants while there's a war going on. And treat them specially because they're suffering. And I think this is true of all asylum requests. You know, it's not about asylum, it's about, can you come here and work? Can you come here and make a living for yourself? That should be the only standard in immigration. I mean, other than you're not a terrorist, you're not a criminal, you don't carry an infectious disease. And as long as we're at war with Islamism, which we are, whether we want to admit it or not, there's zero reason to admit Islamists. And certainly the Palestinians, having been inspired by Hamas for all these years, you know, the risk of Islamism is high. There's just no reason to accept them as immigrants. So I'm an open immigration guy, but you don't open your door up to your enemies, but first you have to define them as enemies. You can't declare Islam a religion of peace and Islam, all Muslims are wonderful and the same as everybody, and then block them from immigration. You have to reverse course. You have to declare at least the ideology of Islamism as evil and bad and the enemy, and not allow people to come in who hold that ideology. And it's not that hard to screen them. So anyway, France doesn't see it that way. They are guided by good old Comte altruism. The Gazans are suffering. Therefore, the Gazans will make good immigrants. We should invite them all in. That is altruism. Full on altruism. You got to admire their willingness to be consistent. All right, finally, last story we're covering, and then I'll go to your questions. Still time to get in some questions if you want. You know, I'm particularly excited about the prospects of biotech in the coming decades. There's an amazing potential, particularly if you combine biotech with AI and with kind of breakthroughs that have happened over the years, including CRISPR. gene sequencing and gene editing and everything to do with that. The progress in biotech has the potential to be amazing if the regulators allow it, and if it if they don't put up blockades to it. I don't trust RFK not to put up those blockades. You can already see it with his restrictions on mRNA vaccines. Well, as we decline maybe in biotech research, in the amount of money going into it, and in our willingness to approve it and to fund it and to kind of embrace biotech and biotech innovation, I can tell you that in China, they have no qualms about it. Chinese drug makers are pouring massive amount into Chinese biotech companies. And gone are the days when all Chinese drug makers and biotech companies did was copy the West. They are truly pushing the boundaries of medicine right now. The number of novel drugs in China for cancer, weight loss, and more that are entering into development now exceeds the number that the European Union has and is approaching close to the amount of such drugs that are being deployed in the United States. And this is research. This is not final thing, right? In development. I mean, again, this is China. China that was good to make, cheap knockoffs and had quality issues. And the drugs couldn't be trusted. Well, today, in terms of quality, in terms of all of that, they're as cutting edge as any Western company. And the new research, the new science they are doing is as good as it's being done anywhere else. The reality is that China has many, many, many scientists, many more than the United States, many of whom were trained in the U.S., were trained in the best universities in the U.S. and Europe. And it could very well be that, again, with their embrace of AI and their embrace of entrepreneurship and leaving these companies alone, at least it seems that way, that, China, a lot of the future scientific or tech innovations in biotech might come from China. And with Trump threatening massive tariffs on pharmaceuticals that are imported into the United States, we as Americans might be priced out of whatever innovations happens in biotech as we move into the future. We will see. We will see. Another way in which Trump, in a time where we should be doubling up on freedom, doubling up on innovation and entrepreneurship, instead we're doubling up on lose-lose tariffs and reducing basic research and demonizing certain types of biology. It is truly, truly sad what we are missing out on. Lincoln said I should live to be 150. Yeah, I should live to be 150. And by the time I get to 150, there should be drugs that allow me to live to 200. By the time I get to 200, there should be drugs that allow me to live to 250. And I'm talking about living with a capital L, not living on some machine. I'm talking about really living. But it probably won't happen. It's likely not to happen, not because I don't think the science can get there, but because I don't think the politics will allow it to happen. Because I think that, we are underinvesting in these kind of things because the government is creating so many barriers to innovation in biotech. If I'm cloned, that doesn't help me. My clone is not me. So being cloned doesn't help me unless I can upload my consciousness into the clone, which I don't think you'll be able to do. All right, guys, thank you. I appreciate all the support. I appreciate you guys being here. We are entering our second hour. We've reached our first hour goal, but we should push into that second hour goal if at all possible. Let's see. We've got a bunch of questions, but we could take more. So feel free, particularly on the $20 level or $50, $100 level. $250 level. We haven't had anybody do $250 in a long time. It's interesting that the kind of composition of who asks questions has changed over the years in an interesting way. We basically have a few people who ask most of the $20 questions. It's interesting. And some of the people who used to ask like 100, 250 have disappeared, have gone on us. Don't know where they are. All right, let's see. Yes, let's start with, before I get to Super Chat questions, I'll get to them in a minute. I want to remind you, we have 3 sponsors of the show. Hendershot Wealth Management. If any of you were interested in saving money on capital gains, it sounds like some of you have quite a bit of capital gains, maybe in your stock portfolio, maybe in a particular stock that you bought, or maybe in, I don't know if this works for Bitcoin, but it would be interesting to find out if it works for Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is taxed differently. But if you have capital gains from securities, certainly, or if you have capital gains from a sold business, there's actually a way to legitimately, legally, and low risk, basically shield your capital gains from taxes. Basically defer them and make sure you don't pay capital gains on an ongoing basis on the gains that you realize. So to do that, to find out more about it, you can go to hendershotwealth.com/YBS, hendershotwealth.com/YBS. You can check out the video where I interview Robert Hendershot. That's on my YouTube channel. I put the link to hendershotwealth.com/YBS in the chat. Just read up about it. If you think it's interesting, sign up there, and then they'll just arrange for a one-on-one meeting with you. If it's something that makes sense to you, do it. If it doesn't make sense to you, don't do it. No obligations. And it's not going to be a pressure sales thing. There's not going to be any sales. They either convince you on the math or they don't convince you on the math. Either it makes sense for you financially or it doesn't make sense for you financially. But it is pretty amazing. If you're about to sell a business, planning to sell a business in the future, living off of stock that you sell, and you have to pay capital gains taxes on it as you sell it, or any one of those, or you have a big payday, you've got stock in a company that is that you've made a lot of money off of, but if you sell that stock, you're gonna have to pay a huge amount of capital gains. This is the solution for you, and so check out hendershotwealth.com/YBS. The Ayn Rand Institute. So I made a mistake by telling you that they are running a 30% discount on Ocon right now, and you get another 10% from being a YBS listener. But the 10% is not additive to the 30. It's 10% on the remaining. So it actually works out not to be 40% discount. It works out to be like 36% discount, something like that. Still better than nothing, right? 36%, it's more than a third. So go right now to aynrand.org/start here and sign up for Ocon for next year in New Orleans in June. Doesn't include the 4th of July weekend. And you can get a 36% discount. Just fill it out normally. That'll give you the 30% discount. And then when it has a discount code, Just put in 26 YBS 10, 26 YBS 10 to get an extra 10% over what's left. So you get the picture. And finally, Alex Epstein is a sponsor, alexepstein.substack.com, alexepstein.substack.com. Alex is the number one, the best, 37%, Mary Vance correctly. It's 37%, not 36%. Alex is the best thinker out there on questions of energy and questions of, power, electricity. How are we going to power the data centers for AI? Also an expert on subsidies to the different energy industries. And an expert now on lobbying in Washington. So if you're interested in any of those topics, you should definitely subscribe to alexepstein.substack.com. You'll know a lot more, you'll learn a lot, and you'll just become a better thinker and a better communicator. All right, guys. I'll remind you one last time, Super Chat is here. You can ask questions, add stuff, participate by asking questions. You get to determine the topics that I talk about. I'll talk about anything you want me to talk about. Just put it in a question on the Super Chat. You can also support the show by using a sticker, which is a dollar amount without any question. And you can do that by clicking on the dollar sign at the bottom of the chat that you have there. And you can do that. All right. And then finally, if you really want to support the show, and I know a lot of you want to support the show, but you just need to get up and do it. I know a lot of you just haven't got around to doing it. Just go to patreon.com. Just put patreon.com right now in your browser, patreon.com, and then search Yaron Brook Show, and then just sign up for a monthly contribution and get it done with. And then you're done. You don't have to think about it again. You don't have to worry about the fact that you're not trading with Yaron. You're getting stuff and not paying back. So do it. All right. No, it's not next Saturday. It's a Saturday after that. All right, finally, I forgot to say this last time. If you would like to be a part of the taping of the Peterson Academy courses that I'm doing one on money. We'll talk about crypto there, and one on trade. We'll talk about globalization and tariffs there. Then 8 hours each. It'll be between. You can do one or both, either one or both. You can. Let me get you the. Where do I find that? Let me get you. I'm going to put the link in the chat for signing up for attending these. Doesn't cost you anything. Not only doesn't it cost you, I forgot to say this in the past, which is ridiculous. You actually get a subscription to Peterson Academy free for a year. That's pretty amazing. They're basically paying you to attend. That's a value of about $500, and they'll pay you to attend. Right? Nate says, since Yaron is a gold bug, I will now be watching his show on money. I'm not a gold bug. I don't own a lot of gold. I'm an investment bug. I'm not a gold bug. I'm just not a crypto. I'm not a Bitcoin bug. I'm not a bug. I'm a thinking human being that evaluates all these things. But I do think that if we ever went to free market, a complete free market, free banking, free market, competition between currencies, I have no doubt that I think gold becomes money again and beats out crypto, beats out Bitcoin. You might have crypto off of gold. You might have what you would ultimately land up with is basically stable coins based on gold. Right? That's what I think you would have if you had a completely free market, if government stepped away from banking completely. That's not going to happen either. So why worry about it? And if it turns out that I'm wrong, why should gold be worth anything? Because it's useful. It's a metal that is incredibly useful, primarily for jewelry, some for industry. I mean, the amount of gold mined today, and more gold is mined today than ever before, most of it, 60% of it, goes to non-monetary uses. So 60% goes to jewelry and industrial inventory. It has a use. It has value beyond its monetary value. And, you know, it's always been valued by human beings because of its use for jewelry. So, you know, it sits in a vault, but it doesn't really sit in a vault because you write, you know, in a gold standard, you write paper money or digital money that is backed by that gold in a vault that has value because it could be used for other stuff. And the gold is constantly transacting, and the ledger, constantly is moving that gold, those gold bars, between individuals based on who owes what to whom. So it's you know, that's the definition of money. The definition of money is that which facilitates trade. And gold has always, throughout human history, facilitated trade. And there's no reason it should stop now. It didn't facilitate trade by people literally moving gold around, not in the 19th century anyway. In the 19th century, it facilitated trade by sitting in the bank that then issued notes on what was sitting in the bank, notes that were convertible, redeemable into gold, but the notes were used as money. Now, maybe it's not gold, maybe it's some other commodity, but it's going to be commodity. So, but the problem with Bitcoin is it's not worth anything. It's just not worth anything. So I'm all for man-made money, but Bitcoin is not worth anything. It cannot be used for anything. And because it cannot be used for anything, it has there's no reason to own it other than the common delusion that we all accept. It's not a myth at all. If you understood where money came from, how money evolved, this is why you should come to my course. If you understood where money actually comes from, how money developed, what money is, conceptually, what money is. I mean, read Ayn Rand's money speech in Atlas Shrugged. If you understand what money is and what it represents, gold or silver or it could be something else, but gold evolved as money because the market determined that it was the best money. Bitcoin is not digital gold because it doesn't have any use in the digital space. Gold has use in space. Anyway, you know, it's not worth the argument, but Nate, you need to study how money evolved and where it comes from and what it means. And if you understood that, then you wouldn't poo-poo gold. All right, Patreon. Don't forget to support the show on Patreon. John says, all right, this is, Yaron, do you think the Black Panther movement, with its Marxist and collectivist roots, damaged Black American culture by shifting the focus away from individualism and towards victimhood? Yeah, it's not because it shifted, it is. It's because it shifted it away from individualism, so I do. But look, I think, remember, Black culture was, you could say, screwed already because of racism, because of Jim Crow laws. Black culture, you know, was in real trouble. And it, you know, they could have arisen out of the Black culture intellectuals that promoted individualism, right? Individualism, and moved Black culture in a completely different direction. But that would have been an unbelievable achievement, given that the culture generally, any kind of culture, was significantly moving away from individualism anyway. And the Black Panthers were inspired by what was being taught at the universities, which was Marxism, inspired by the general shift in the 1960s away from individualism towards a collectivism. And it would have been very difficult to inspire blacks towards American individualism when America had betrayed them so badly in the post-Civil War era. The Civil War, which promised to liberate them only so much and handed them over to Jim Crow laws, discrimination, and racism. So it wasn't exactly inspiring. So yes, I think it damaged Black American culture, but it's hard to see how Black American culture could have moved in a positive direction, given where it was coming from and given what was going on in America at the time. All right, John also says, do you think that the movement laid the foundation for gangster rap and trap music, which today promotes determinism, materialism, and hostility towards personal responsibility and earned success? I mean, it's possible. I don't know. I don't know enough about Black culture. I don't know enough about gangster rap and trap music. So it's quite possible that the Black Panthers had a role to play. It's hard to believe that they were the only thing that led to that. There probably were a lot of other things. I think more importantly is the victimhood culture and mentality that the war on poverty and the welfare state helped entrenched in the Black community. It's not just Black Panthers and Marxism and bad intellectuals, but add that to the welfare state and the idea that the state is telling them, here's a check, don't worry, don't work, don't take care of yourself, you don't need to. That basically the whole premise of the welfare state is a rejection of personal responsibility. I think all of that ganged up on Black culture to kind of make it and shape it the way it has become. And it's sad. They were betrayed by the intellectuals, and they were betrayed by our government, by the welfare state. John continues, also, do you see the solidarity first historically used by Marxists and anti-individualist movement as an inherently collectivistic and overall negative symbol? Has it ever been used in a way you agree with 100%? No, I don't think it can be. It's inherently an altruistic movement. It's inherently about having solidarity with people who suffer because they're suffering. It's not about caring about people who suffer for no fault of their own. It's about the focus on suffering as a end in itself, and that providing you with virtue. It's very much like modern woke and modern intersectionality. So no, I can't imagine it ever being used in a positive way, and I don't think it has ever been used in a positive way. I'll just say one thing to Nate. There is no such thing as intrinsic value. Right. Anyway, Michael, if the Republicans lose in a landslide in 2026, and by the end of Trump's term, he is viewed as a complete failure, while Milei is a resounding success, will the Republican Party switch to the Libertarian position? I mean, I don't see how and why, right? I mean, it's not like we model success and we go after success, right? So it would be great if that happened, but I just don't see anybody looking at Milei right now and saying we want to be like him. And maybe that'll change in 3 years when he gets even more successful. But did people look at Chile and say we want to be like them? Clock. before he died, my father disinherited his other kids. By now, my 3 siblings say it's selfish, but now my 3 siblings say it's selfish if I don't split the inheritance, insinuating that if I don't split the inheritance, they'll cut ties with me. Good riddance? I mean, it depends on your relationship with them, but I assume that it's not a great relationship. But the reality is that it was your father's stuff, and he gets to decide what he wants to do with it. If your siblings want some of it, and they want, in a sense, your help, they want your charity, they want you to give them some money, then they should make the case for why you should do it. But not by mortgaging their relationship with you. That's just emotional blackmail, and that would be a good enough reason to disassociate yourself from them. Right? So, it's quite possible it's good riddance. Let them make the case to you why you should support them. But, it's not selfish. You're just fulfilling your father's wishes. Michael, they're working on a bill to eliminate all capital gains taxes on home sales. The thinking is the bill could alleviate housing shortages by encouraging more homeowners to sell, thereby increasing inventory. Yeah, I mean, that'd be great. That'd be great. That is, eliminating capital gains on houses is good. Right now, you can deduct $500,000. So the first $500,000 in capital gains is not taxable. So a lot of people, it's less than $500,000, so they are not being taxed. But yeah, I think. But yes, I think that would be terrific. It would increase. It would encourage people to sell. It would increase mobility. It would be generally a good thing. You still got a problem that ultimately you can't increase inventory, ultimately, unless you build more. So it is true that we need to build more. Now, as the baby boomers die off and leave homes as inheritance or sell the home before they die, move into old age homes or whatever, the inventory will rise. But even they will be more inclined to sell their home if they don't have to pay capital gains taxes on it than if they do. So yeah, I mean, generally, eliminating taxes is always good. Eliminating it like this, not just lowering capital gains taxes on home sales, but eliminating them. I would like to see all capital gains taxes eliminated. Michael, in California, is tech regulated less than every other industry because it's assumed these engineers are smart, they don't need state protection, whereas fast food employers aren't too bright and need state controls? No, I don't think that's why. I think the reason that there's less regulation is because the tech industry lobbies for less regulation. So they have a lot of power in the state. The state revenue is primarily from the tech industry. So when they go to Washington and they, talk about it, then and they insist on reducing regulations, the lawmakers are much more likely to listen to them, particularly if they threaten to move to another state. So that's the reason. I don't think it's about them being smarter and others not. Other states have the same situation, and their employees are just as regulated as everybody else. So it's because in California, tech has a disproportionate amount of lobbying power. Andrew, some would call Trump selfish, but no, his ego is a fragile shell made of others' opinions, so fragile that he feels he must defend it at any sniff of opposition. Selfishness requires individualism, and Trump's a collectivist. Yeah, and selfishness requires self-esteem, and Trump has none. And he is a narcissist, which makes him second-handed because he's dependent on the feelings and the attitudes of other people towards him. So whatever his feeling about himself is contingent on how other people feel about him. So no, Trump is not selfish. He is selfless, or self-destructive even. So, yeah, self-destructive, I think, is the best term. Alex, are traditional portfolio and asset allocation techniques outdated and obsolete in today's environment, taking into account cryptocurrencies, tax legislation, and protectionism? No, I mean, I not unless you think this is the end of economic growth in America. As long as America, the economy is going to grow, as long as American companies continue to be competitive, innovative, productive, then, the best thing to do is invest in a diversified portfolio of American companies or global companies. And then in terms of how to construct a portfolio, some of that has to change with the times. Protectionism might affect that. You might want to have more of your portfolio in foreign exchange, foreign currency, in a sense, in foreign stocks rather than in American stocks. So there might be other ways you might want to rejiggle the actual portfolio in terms of allocations within the portfolio. But the basic technique, the basic attitude is right. And I don't think changes with cryptocurrencies, tax, and protectionism. And you might, as a hedge, also want to have a little bit of Bitcoin in there. Just in case it does do a lot better than I think, or just in case it goes up a lot. Or you might want to have a basket of cryptocurrencies in your portfolio, just in case Bitcoin lands up not being the winner. It would be really unusual and strange if Bitcoin is the winner, just because it was first. All right. Vikram. My money is managed by professionals. They insist that I hold some Chinese equities as part of the diversification. These have not done well, although small as a percentage. Should I sell or should I hold on to honor their views? No, I mean, I don't think you should necessarily honor their views, but I also don't think you should sell because they haven't done well. You should sell because you have a low opinion of China and maybe you don't want to support them by holding Chinese equities. You should sell because you don't want to be invested in China, if that's the case. But I agree with them that you want exposure. So you maybe get stocks in other Asian companies, replace them with other Asian countries or other developing countries. But their idea of diversification, the fact that something, when you diversify, something by definition will not do well. That is why you diversify. So that whatever does badly is compensated by the fact that some other thing does well. So the reason for selling your Chinese stocks, you should think about what that reason is. It shouldn't be because they performed badly in the past. It's because for whatever reason you think they'll perform badly in the future, or because you don't want to sanction them. All right. I see Nate is taking over the chat. I mean, Nate, you really don't know what you're talking about. Sorry. Little rationalistic, and your understanding of the history of money and where money comes from is wrong. It's not a king who decided that gold should be money. You should read manga, and anyway. RY38. What do you think about John Stossel and Peter Schiff? They both advocate for capitalism, but it seems that they try to convince people based on a utilitarian standpoint instead of a moral standpoint. Yeah, absolutely. They don't take morality seriously. Stossel doesn't, I've talked to Stossel, and he doesn't want to go there, right? It's not an area he wants to go. He certainly doesn't want to challenge conventional morality. He doesn't view himself as a philosopher. He doesn't understand ethics and morality. So it's and Peter Schiff, I think, is similar. I mean, he implicitly is an individualist, implicitly is about individual human flourishing, but he's not quite willing to make that an explicit case, and he's not comfortable making that, even if he believes it. Again, he is an investor. He's not even an economist. And so those are arguments he makes. But most economists make utilitarian. They don't know how to make the individualistic case because they haven't really studied the philosophy and the individualism. Nate, no, the Austrian myth that money, the Austrian case for money arising out of markets has not been disproved. It's been argued against, but it is not, capital N, capital O, capital T, being disproved at all. And, the modern Austrians that acknowledge this are not right. They're wrong. And there are a lot of modern Austrians that don't acknowledge that. And those are the ones who are experts in the field of money. George Selgin doesn't acknowledge it. Larry White doesn't acknowledge it. And they are the ones who have studied and interested most in the issue of money. Now it's not being disproved, but there's no evidence. But that's not true either. There is evidence. There's evidence for the fact that before kings minted coins in gold, private mints existed. So no, there is evidence of private issuance of gold as money and private use of gold as money before kings decided it was such. So if you want the evidence, the two best thinkers of this are Larry White and George Selgin, who are the only people who really, I think, these days understand banking and understand money, because many of the Austrians have gone off the deep end, as far as I can tell, on the issue of money and banking overall. Right. All right. Mary Benz, philosophy at work. I shouldn't spend dollars, but I love you. That is sweet. Jacqueline, can you provide a link for more information like date, time, and location for your live lectures in July, Arizona with Peterson University? I did in the chat. I will also add it to the description of the talk in the YouTube, below the YouTube video. I like numbers. Maybe Yaron and Cato can find a project to co-work on. That's not going to happen. I mean, I like certain individuals at Cato. They have some of the best people in immigration. They have Scott Lincecum and Norbert and others who do very good work on policy and economics, on economic issues. But as an organization, the Cato Institute has a despicable foreign policy, a horrible moral equivocation between Israel and and Hamas, and just a despicable anti-American, anti-Israeli foreign policy. And as a consequence of that, I wouldn't want to do something jointly with them and, in a sense, sanction them as an institution that holds those kinds of views. James, the Supreme Court seems to be letting Trump get away with many cuts to the bureaucracy. I hope they don't do the same with tariffs. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for cutting the bureaucracy and giving the executive branch leverage to do that, I think, is a good thing. I think ultimately you're going to need Congress, and you're going to need Congress approval to actually completely eliminate whole departments. Now, the Supreme Court has not ruled yet on any of these issues, qua issues. All the Supreme Court has done so far is basically overturned the lower courts blocking Trump from doing what he's doing before the court rules. So they've overturned these injunctions, but they haven't actually ruled on any of the cases. We'll see what happens when they actually have to rule on a case. Not your average algorithm. They don't need your money. They tax you to keep you poor. Well, I don't know who a they is. I don't know who they is. Michael, it looks like Trump is setting himself up as some kind of divine hand of God. I don't think that bodes well for us peons. Yeah, I think ultimately that is true. Ann says, you've had problems before naming disagreements with Rand, but you can use that you are a militant atheist, while she said explicitly she was not. Yeah, she said she was not. I say I am. But her statement was a personal statement. It was not a statement of philosophy. She didn't state it qua part of objectivism. She said she, as an advocate, was not a militant atheist. I am, as an advocate for objectivism, am a militant atheist. It's also true that the world has changed quite a bit. The threat of religion was a lot more muted, certainly in the 60s. And I think even in the 70s, it only rises up in the very late 70s, early 80s. And as it rises up, Ayn Rand becomes more explicitly anti-religion and anti-Christianity. So circumstances have changed. It's an issue of context. But lastly, yeah, I don't disagree with Ayn Rand on philosophy. This is not a philosophical point, which you choose to ignore. This is a point of emphasis, a point of emphasis. It's a point of style more than anything else. It's a point of application. And on applications, I've said, if I disagree with Ayn Rand on anything, it's on applications. But I don't disagree with on philosophy. So, not sure what the getcha here is, Anne. I mean, I know you're trying hard to get me on something, but I'm not sure what the getcha is. Boaz says, buy Bitcoin for freedom. There's nothing about Bitcoin that promotes freedom. Yeah, anyway. Ayn Rand might approve. I doubt it. I doubt she would have any opinion about Bitcoin. But I doubt she would approve. I doubt she'd approve of a money detached from any reality. Michael, are there any objectivist judges or high-ranking judges who have been influenced by objectivism? There's certainly high-ranking judges influenced by objectivism. I know of one. There might be others, but I think in the Supreme Court of Arizona, there is a judge that's been definitely influenced by objectivism. Jason, after 9/11, I bluntly told the early anti-war crowd, no, I wanted the victims avenged. Is that the same as being vengeful? If the war was fought swiftly and properly, can it be both just and vengeance? Yeah. I mean, vengeance is fine as long as it's consistent with justice. I have no problem with vengeance. Read the Count of Monte Cristo, right? Getting back at the people, at the bad people is right. So there's nothing wrong with vengeance if it's consistent with justice. So it has to be subjugated to justice. Liam, are Israelis an extremely traumatized people? That's why they're so intense and abrasive. No, I don't think so. I think they're intense and abrasive because they're passionate and they care and they don't put up with bullshit and they don't like games in terms of in human relationships. They say things as they are because they're very reality oriented, very reality focused. What makes them great entrepreneurs and innovative. I don't think it's because they're traumatized. Kim, loved the economics show with Norbert. Great. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Liam, is Andrew Cuomo's narcissism about to win Mamdani this election? Well, I mean, potentially. He has said that if Adams and I guess the Republican candidate, if the three of them should agree that the two who are not, who are in third and fourth place a month before the election should drop out, and that he's willing to agree to that. I think all three of them should get together and make that pledge. They should run the best race right now, and whoever is in second place, the other two should drop out and let him run against Mamdani. Kim says, want more pro-capitalist economists on the show. Kim, for that to happen, you got to convince everybody else to come and watch. We had very few people on live and very, very, very little Super Chat money, which disincentivizes me from doing more of that. I mean, that's the reality. You guys are much more generous. I get much better response when I bring in objectivists and philosophers. So, I'm motivated and incentivized to do that, right? But I agree with you. This is why I've invited them, and we got George Selja next week. So, I've invited you all for exactly that. All right. Clark, did you hear the leaked tapes of what Trump's sister said about him? Plenty revealing. Do you think most of his family wants nothing to do with him? I have not heard the leaked tapes, but, nothing anybody says about Trump would surprise me. Do his family not want to have any? I think the healthy part of his family doesn't want to have anything to do with him. Absolutely. He's not a good guy. He's not a nice guy. He's not a good guy. He's a bad guy. Doodle Bunny, can you give an example of a selfish case for compassion? Sure. I mean, that's way too floating. Compassion towards whom? What does compassion mean? Caring about somebody? And caring about their suffering? What if it's somebody you love? And because you love them, they were a part of you. They were massive value to you. Their suffering is something that does damage to you. Compassionate towards somebody who is, a productive human being who builds and creates, and something bad has happened to him and he's lost everything. You value capable human beings. You value productive human beings. Suddenly something bad has happened to somebody good. Yeah, you should feel compassion towards them. I mean, it's selfish to feel compassion to. It's in your self-interest to feel compassion to. It comes from your values, from the fact that you value them for whatever reason, for whatever rational reason. Hopper Campbell, just like the woke left ate itself, it appears MAGA is on the road to self-destruction. The Jeffrey Epstein issue is the first major disintegration of the MAGA coalition. Yeah, and it's perfect that this is the issue. I saw earlier trending on Twitter was something like pedophile Trump or something like that. I don't know if that was MAGA or just trolls or whether it was Chinese bots. But clearly this is something that's upsetting a lot of the MAGA people. They're up in arms about it. Good. Would it surprise anybody that Trump actually was part of, that Trump actually did horrible things to underage girls? Would it shock anybody? Would anybody say, oh, that's out of character? I wouldn't have expected that from Trump. I mean, no. I mean, the stuff he said about women, the stuff he said about the teen pageant, just his whole character and his whole mentality, everybody would go, yeah, that's Trump. So, I'm not saying he's protecting anybody. I'm not saying there is a Epstein file. I don't know. I have no idea. But I love the fact that this is the issue, that ultimately Trump's character, kind of human being Trump is coming back to bite him on this issue. I think that's good. Andrew, Harry Binswanger once told Rand of a risky investment he might make. She said, protect your standard of living. He invested and lost a lot. When he told Rand, instead of, I told you so, she said, you should have asked my reasons. That is interesting, right? That is interesting. But Rand was very risk averse when it came to investing. Very risk averse when it came to investing. So I wouldn't take investment advice from Ayn Rand. In spite of that story. And he should have asked for reasons. And I'm curious what her reasons were with regard to that particular investment, or was it more general? I mean, I find that philosophers generally are not very good investors. I'll just leave it at that. From my experience, philosophers in objectivism are not particularly good investors. Michael, did you see hundreds walked out at Turning Point USA event as Tucker Carlson began his anti-Israel rant? No, I didn't see that, but that is good to hear. That's good. Maybe there's still a little bit of sanity in that movement. A little bit. James, it is scary to think such a large percentage of Americans are so into blood and soil. Reagan's optimistic America is gone. It's certainly gone from our political landscape. And I think it's gone from our political landscape because Americans don't respond to that anymore. I mean, I keep seeing these bits from Ronald Reagan making jokes. And it's just, and jokes and just his statements and his speeches. I mean, I know Ayn Rand didn't like him, and I certainly don't like what he did to the Republican Party. But he had such a benevolence. And he was quick and he was sharp. You know, that bit in the debate where they're asking about his age. And he says something like, you know, I'm pledging now that I won't make an issue in this campaign of age, you know, something about the age of my opponent, the fact that my opponent is youthful and inexperienced. And even Mondale, who was on the other side of that, you know, broke out laughing. Because, I mean, Reagan said it in such a benevolent way. It wasn't like, think about how Trump behaved in the debates, particularly in 2016. Just the viciousness. The nastiness, and compare that to the benevolence of Reagan. I mean, it's just a completely different America. It's scary. Samuel, what do you think has driven Trump back to back Ukraine? I think he's being humiliated by Putin. I think he really did believe that he could manipulate Putin, and Putin's manipulating him, and I think he's being embarrassed by that. I think he's being humiliated by that. And I think he doesn't like that. Remember, he likes loyalty. He likes people who do what he wants them to do. He likes people who respond to him. And Putin says one thing, and then I think today I saw Trump saying, you know, I'd have this great conversation with Putin, then I'd go back to the White House, and the First Lady would say, you know, he just bombed civilians in this town. So it just makes him look bad. I think that's the main reason. And I think, you know, I think the Europeans have figured out how to deal with Trump, at least on these issues, by sucking up to him. And I think they've, you know, he likes them now because they've sucked up to him. He said this after NATO. It was pretty amazing. All right, Christian, given Bitcoin's layer 2 advancements enabling low-cost instant cross-border payments and stablecoins, do these real-world applications change your perspective? Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think the more you get real-world applications for Bitcoin, the more likely it is to be used. You know, I think smart contracts are interesting, and you can layer smart contracts now into Bitcoin. So it definitely makes it it's now faster and cheaper to transact. It used to be very expensive and fairly slow to actually do transaction in Bitcoins. Now you can do them faster. The layer, the lightning layer, I think it's called, lightning, that they placed on Bitcoin is certainly an improvement and makes it more likely that it wins in the race between crypto. But again, it doesn't change my fundamental view that if it ever became something that people are using to exchange stuff on large scale and threatened the supremacy of the dollar, then the government would find a way to shut it down. But this is what you don't get, Nate. Tokenized barter is the gold standard. Gold is just a token. And, Bitcoin is just a token. This is exactly what tokenized barter is. These serve as tokens to facilitate barter. That's what money does. Money is a token that facilitates barter. And that's what gold and Bitcoin do. All right, guys, I will see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. East Coast time. So back to a better schedule for Europeans, I know. And we'll do for a new show then. And let's see, what else do we have to say is that's it. That's it. I will continue arguing with Nate some other time. But money is the token. That's all it is. So there's no issue. The money is not problematic. The token is not problematic. Any token is going to have some issue. And the market chose the best token available. And it worked when it was free. It worked amazingly well. I will see you all tomorrow. Bye, everybody. Have a great night.